everyone! Welcome to the Chaotic Wholesome Talk Show. I, as usual, am your co-host, Kay Purcell. I'm here with a special guest today, and David Lee. David, you're up first. Tell us who you are and what you're doing here.
Hi, I'm David. Along with Kay, I am the co-host for the Chaotic Wholesome Talk Show. Oh my God, where's Sauce? I'm worried.
I know.
Where every week we talk TTRPGs, where we talk about how to be a better GM, how to be a better player, how to be a better performer, all with a focus on inclusion and intersectionality. So basically, how to not be a terrible human being
In the tabletop space.
in the tabletop space.
We're not going to tell you how to live your life elsewhere, but here.
I mean, I will.
You will, definitely.
But yeah, you can find us here every Tuesday about now, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. And today, our guest, our valued guest is
Cam of Daylight Publishing. Cam, tell us about yourself. Tell us what you do. Tell us why you're here.
Sure. So hello everyone. I am Cam Day, the mind behind Daylight Publications here in New Hampshire, over on the East Coast. When I'm not writing and creating content, I'm a full-time middle and high school teacher. So I teach social studies and English this year. And one of the... Oh, hi, Freya. My cat has decided she would like to be part of the program, too. Really, the big things that I do with publishing is mostly world building, setting building, creating new lineages, subclasses, player content, and recently really trying to help bring together the RPG space in the Northeast, especially in New England, where we don't really, I know there's a lot of us, but we don't really have a space other than like Boston Comic Con or PAX, but even that sometimes is a lot for some of us to do. And just also kind of offering advice and helping folks sort of take what they want to the next level, but being honest with them about, hey, it's a lot of work and it's going to take time. So that's sort of my shtick.
Excellent. Well, thank you. So we are here today, chat. We are our two topics. I mean, it's us. So, we're
right.
Probably going to wander and talk about whatever we want to wander and talk about. But the two big topics today are going to be world building and like turning your TTRPG hobby into a business. And so, if you have thoughts, if you have questions, if you have things you would like to know about that, throw them in chat. As always, I'm your host, Kay. You can find me every other Wednesday on the Emergency Power Podcast playing Soul. That game's getting real, y'all. That game is getting very real. You can also find me this coming Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern on playing Waterdeep Tales, where I play Roxy, the alchemist raccoon who's passionate about black powder. That'll be over at Saucefire's channel. Trixie.
okay.
That is the first time I have done it. Other people have done it. Yeah, that's the first time I messed that one up. I'm thinking of Roxy because I play Roxy with David and then Trixie with Sauce, and that's not Trixie at all. And on the 29th, you can find me over on at the Red Hair Inn playing in the Halls of the Mad King, which is a 3-part horror campaign, which I'm very excited about. But today, we are here talking about, we're going to dive first into world building because, I mean, that's a thing we can spend a lot of time on. And it's a thing that both David and I are passionate about. So talk to us a little bit about your approach to world building. And if you are getting ready to build something new, be it your first time really building out your world, or be it you're getting ambitious. This is your first time really deep diving into lore and setting. Where do you start? What's your advice?
Sure. So usually I try to think of, and it's going to sound cheesy, but something that has not been done, something that is not the norm. Because, when I was younger, I read a lot of very standard fantasy, David Eddings, Tolkien, George R. R. Martin, Diana Wynne Jones. So stuff that was very like rooted in very much like this is kind of X cookie cutter for what fantasy is. And I started to think more about how can you do it differently? How can you change it up? So one of the first places where I really decided to take that to the next level was, I wouldn't say I hate elves, but I get very bored with how they are often like they are the people that are on the hill. Everyone loves them. They're the ethereal, forever people. And we first kind of played with that concept when we did our setting, Comets and Cockpits, which is a space junker fantasy. So think like Borderlands, Firefly, Wildstar, kind of crammed into one world. And we thought, wouldn't it be funny if that backfired for the elves? They live up in their groves, and they don't come out, and then suddenly like, crap, everyone's got space travel. We need to think of something fast, guys. We've been sequestered for too long. So they're like, well, we can do druidic stuff. So they just make spaceships out of trees and flowers. But
like the World Tree in Hyperion.
Yeah, kind of. And so that was sort of where we first started playing with it. And then when I started doing more micro settings, because I was like, hey, big stuff is fun, but doing smaller stuff would be easier. I came up with the idea for our world, a world called Aesir, where trolls, because I've always loved trolls, trolls are the progenitor people. They have this near sci-fi culture, but then humans kind of use that, or mortals use that technology to ascend to godhood and fight off the trolls. So now it's like a Weird West kind of troll ruins and everything. But really, the thing, I always find that thing. What is something that hasn't been done, or something that you could play with, or like maybe a little one-off thing you thought of, or you might have heard of, and then expand from there, grow it from there. And it could be something as much as me of I hate elves, to something as like, oh, I wonder, about mushrooms, and make a world entirely made of mushrooms. But yeah, that's usually where I start. And I also, especially recently, have been doing more soft world building. I used to be very into like hard world building, so very much Tolkien. And I love Tolkien. I love hard world building. Give me a thick, meaty world book any time of the day. If none of you ever dived into Kobold Press's Midgard setting, that's the kind of setting I like. Big old world book, almost 500 pages. But having something that's small, only 12 or 15 pages, max, 30 pages to play with, is fun, and it's a fun challenge for me when I put that of like, okay, I can only build within this parameters. What's the essential stuff? And then it kind of opens the playing field and opens the sandbox a little bit. So
meaty world building.
Yes. Tal'Dorei is definitely an example of very meaty world building.
For those of you who don't regularly watch Critical Role, they did a GM's roundtable of Matt, Mercer, Brennan Lee Mulligan, and Abria. And they asked Matt, they're like, when do you feel like a thing is done? This is sitting in front of them, and Matt's like, it's not, nowhere, it's never, it's nowhere to done. And Brennan's like, do you see the cry for help? That this is sitting in front of him. This is one continent, and he still says it's not done.
Yep. That was an iconic scene. There were so many iconic moments from that roundtable.
I cannot recommend that enough to GMs for A, learning things, and B, just feeling seen.
Yeah, and really, I think there was a great point in that video, I think, which also made me really think about where Matt talked about how he started Exandria with just like one little swamp town. And I think for folks who are ready to take that next step and might have been playing in like Eberron or Tal'Dorei or Ravnica or some other published setting, if they want to take it to the level and do their own, it doesn't have to start with anything huge. It could be a little gross, muddy marsh town. It can be a traveling caravan. It could be a big city in the middle of a prairie. It can be one thing, and then it can kind of like grow organically. If anyone... My fiance loves Studio Ghibli movies, and she's been getting me more and more into them. And my favorite is Nausicaa, Valley of the Winds, because that is, to me, is like a perfect example of soft world building, because you're dunked right in. Not a lot of stuff is explained. You get like a few minutes of like prologue and epilogue, but that's it. And it leaves you wanting more. And so I think, yeah, just think of a couple themes, maybe a little location, and then you're good to go. And then don't think you have to be like the hardcore people.
David knows. Those of you who watched my horror campaign, The God Plane, that literally started with like, hey, this nightmare's creepy. Like, I had a nightmare. It was weird. What if we made that part of a game? Like, it just literally, I want to run a horror game. This nightmare is creepy. What do you think?
And creepy is the word. And it has been, yeah, building Godplane was nonstop creepy. But, yeah, like they're sort of opposite ends of the spectrum between like the big, huge source book. Like when we were working on Godplane, we wanted to make sure that it could integrate with Ravenloft. I always get the second part of that wrong. Ravenloft.
It's even more confusing because my company announced Ravenbound today, and like between that and then what was the there's the Raven's Quest in there's a show, there's an Apple Plus show about it's Silicon Valley only working on video games, and their video game was Raven's Quest. And it's like there's too many Raven things in my life right now.
Continue. You might want to talk to your team, because when you type Ravenbound into the internet,
we literally just announced a teaser today. So like
yep.
SEO has not done a thing yet. That takes a little time for those of you who don't know that. But we'll get into that later with turning your hobby into a business.
So you saw an empty space, and you aimed to fill it. Also, for anyone who hasn't, for one, go check out Cam's website and Twitter. I have it here somewhere. Because it is just a mountain of material that you can on Twitter here.
More like I got bored and had too much time.
I mean, we all remember having free time at some point.
Like you got to fill that time somehow. And I don't know that TTRPGs are cheaper than drugs, but I don't know that they have fewer side effects. But do TTRPGs, not drugs, or both. I don't know. I'm not the boss of you.
Right. I am though. Do both. So for someone who wants to get started digging through all of your stuff, where would you point them to first? Like, is there a particular setting or micro setting or subclass or something that you think is a good entry point?
Sure. So I think one of the works I'm really the most proud of was something I literally like wrote in an afternoon and then just threw up online. And that was the So You Arrive at a Tavern. And that was the guide that I put together just after, having played D&D for 12 years, having been through multiple iterations, having grown a ton myself as a dungeon master, and really frustrated with how little guidance 5e provides to new DMs on how to build a setting and how to build a campaign. And that's where 4e has always won my heart, and 4e will always be the edition that I love the most. Because that's where I got in, and the 4e Dungeon Master's Guide 2 is like the best Dungeon Master's Guide in existence, because it sits down, it fully goes through how to build encounters, how to build NPCs, how to craft a campaign. And so I took bits of that, but then also using sort of, again, I am a teacher, so kind of using the education models that I've learned and how I've taught story structure and how I've taught narrative arcs and stuff like that, to build a supplement to help folks take their want to the next step. And literally, again, whipped it up in an afternoon, and it was just kind of like just brain mush. And I was like, hey, this will be something fun. Wasn't really expecting to go anywhere. And then the D&D Twitter retweeted it, and it like exploded. And I was like, okay, I guess it was good. But it's really like, because the big thing I did is I broke it down very much into like TV film ideas, like how long do you want your campaign to be? Do you want it to be more of like a made-for-TV movie? Do you want it to be more like a mini-series? Do you want it to be a franchise? How do you build NPCs? Are they more of an antagonist, protagonist, background, supporting? But that was a really good one as far as like aids. The subclass, or the original class that I'm really proud of is the Expeditionary, which I made with my friend Kai Linder and Lid Van Hoy and our amazing artist Alex Coggin. And that was out of the fact I don't get to play in very many games. So whenever I get to like sneak in for a couple of sessions, I always take advantage of it. But it got me thinking how, even though adventuring and exploring is obviously part of RPGs, there's nothing really built to reward you or to literally focus on the exploring aspect. There's really nothing that's focused like that. And I took inspiration from an MMO I used to play called Wildstar, which was this awesome sort of space fantasy MMO that sadly did not last very long. Where you had careers, and one of the careers you could have was an explorer. So you would get rewards for exploring as much of the mini-map as possible and finding all these different locations in the different zones. And with the Expeditionary, I was like, building a whole original class is super hard. But I went into it being like, okay, I'm going to take all of the 12 base classes we have and smush them into 6 subclasses for the Expeditionary altogether. So sort of each subclass kind of focuses on different aspects, but it's all about going out, exploring, learning new things. The more you note take, the more you chronicle, the stronger you get, the more you learn. And those are very much passion projects. And then I just made stupid stuff, like Circle of the Omnics is just me being like, what if Ben 10 was a druid? And you could turn into aliens. And it's one of the most mechanically imbalanced, broken things I've ever made. But it's also one of the most fun to do.
Every so often, you're like, I've played D&D enough to find out it's time to fuck around.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that was I did once fuck around where I made, because I love Bionicles. I grew up loving Bionicles. And I made the Feyforged, who are a Bionicle homage for Warforged in Eberron. And I had this one guy write and go, yeah, sorry, Bionicles don't belong in Eberron. You can do them in some other world, but I don't think they're appropriate here. And I was like, dude, where the fuck else are you going to put Bionicles in D&D? Like, where else? As far as settings, because we have a lot, Comets and Cockpits is super fun. It's our space junker fantasy one, and that was a lot of fun. But it was definitely also the setting where it was a challenge to put it together, because it's 2 huge books. We're still working on the second book. But if folks want, because I got Spelljammer, it's kind of lacking. It's not as incredible as I was hoping. And so we had kind of done Comets and Cockpits 2 years ago because we didn't think Spelljammer was going to happen. And I still very much think that Spelljammer, or that Comets and Cockpits is better. But the one that is near and dear to my heart is our first one, which was Supers and Sorcery, which is our superhero comic book fantasy world. That was the first big book we did. It was during the first wave of COVID. I was home student teaching online. Some of my friends were like, how would you put superheroes into RPGs? One of them tagged me, and then like half an hour later we made a server, got a bunch of people, and started working on getting a Kickstarter set up, even though none of us had ever done it before. And it's just, that one's the most special one to me because it's simple, It's not super crazy. It's not a huge book. We didn't pile on tons of stuff. And trying to do superheroes in RPGs is so hard.
Yeah.
Because you can either go really simple, like with Masks, if from Magpie Games, which Masks is awesome. I love Masks. But it's very, very simple. And it doesn't have that crunch that some folks might want. Then on the other side of the spectrum, you have Mutants and Masterminds, which is just like extra crunchy peanut butter. It takes you like 4 hours to spec out a character for Mutants and Masterminds, which some folks like. But all we did with Supers and Sorcery is we just added like 2 or 3 things, like 2 or 3 new mechanics to give it a little bit of extra comic book flavor, a couple of subclasses, and then we just made the city. And the cities of Beacon is divided into 4 levels, with each level kind of being a different age of comic books. And we very much like tried to focus on the history of comic books and stuff. It's just goofy. It's fun. You can play as a plant person. My home game, they're all 4 of them. My fiance, my future brother-in-law, and 2 of my friends. They're a whole group of Clory folk. They're just plant people out saving the universe. Yes.
I have a vegetation genasi that I get to play in one of my home games.
And it's a fun world. And right now we're going through and adding more content to it. And it's fun to see kind of like, because we get to play in the playground of like, okay, we love these certain comic book characters and this kind of thing. How could we reimagine them to work in our world so that they're obviously an homage, but they're still unique to us? So one of the books we did was Demon Dude, which was our Hellboy homage. And I knew I wanted to do Abe because he's my favorite. Abe Sapien's my favorite Hellboy character. So we recreated him as Gabe Amphibian, Dr. Gabe Amphibian. He looks like a giant slod. He wears cardigans and is a psychiatrist for supernatural villains and heroes.
Wow.
And just,
So he's very busy.
Yes, he's very busy. He actually has a rehabilitation estate outside the city where it's a bunch of bungalows where he invites people to come and like learn how to reintegrate into society. And the art of him also is great because he's just this huge frog man with teeny little glasses and a little notebook, and he's just writing notes down. But yeah, it's stuff like that. I would definitely recommend if folks want a meteor setting, jump into Supers and Sorcery. But then we also have micro settings. We got, if you like, Pirates of the Caribbean and Our Flag Means Death, then Espamena is great for you. It's got a whole dueling system, so whatever your core stat is, you can still duel. There's Aesir, Trolls. There's a whole crafting system for making magical guns that can shoot magic. And then there's Ramia, Rain and Faith, which is kind of like our low fantasy, chthonic world where you can die and be resurrected by whales, and you get spooky powers, or you can be born under a moon and get spooky powers.
I like spooky powers.
Yeah. So, that's kind of some of
the question is, can the whale resurrect you only during their month, or is it just anytime goes? Anytime goes.
So those are that you would be a whale touched character. So it's very much inspired by Dishonored because I love Dishonored. And just whales are also very cool. So it's like, what's cooler than a regular whale? A whale that lives in a swamp, but the swamp is actually like thousands of feet deep and is full of spookiness.
And yeah, if you are looking to start building out a world, like often it helps to building out your own world can be very intimidating and it can be very overwhelming. And even like, I know Gabe Hicks has talked about how he goes out and buys like books filled with just NPCs, just pre-made NPCs. So he walks somewhere and they're like, I want to talk to a barkeeper. He's like, hold on, flip. Here's your barkeeper. So he doesn't have to, they don't have to keep track of all this. They can just flip to a page and be like, oh, here's this. And like, Gabe has GM'd for Dimension 20, right? Like, I point this out because some people are like, I have to be Matt Mercer, I have to be Brennan Lee Milgren, I have to come up with all of these incredibly original things on the fly every time. No. Cheat. Steal. Be
Yeah,
inspired by your favorite things, reskin
Yeah.
them to fit your world. No one's gonna know by the time it's in. And even if
Mood-
they do recognize, well, I think that came from that, they'll be like, oh, that's cool, because I also like that thing. And I figured out where it came from.
Yeah, mood boards are great. I've got my bookshelf here, and like, for instance, I've got my I don't know, I have my Art of Transformers Fall of Cybertron, which, if I need a quick inspiration for something techie, I go to that. Or I've got the art books for Ixalan and Innistrad, or I've got a couple comic books there. Like, there is nothing more fun for me than seeing something that I love very much and thinking about how can I adapt it. And that's 90% of where most of my stuff comes from. Some of the first books I did were Halloween themed patrons for Warlocks, because Warlock patrons are super easy to make, and Warlocks are by far my favorite class. And I was just like, there's no Headless Horseman NP or Warlock patron. There's no Baba Yaga Warlock patron. There's no. Then I made one called the Gourd Lord, where it's just a pumpkin man.
I want a sentient pumpkin. Like, I want the giant pumpkin as my patron. I'm not gonna lie.
Done.
Spooky season is coming. I'm here for it.
Done.
Yeah, it's the Gourd Lord is like a 15-foot tall, emaciated being with just a cackling jack-o'-lantern as a head.
I'm into
As
it.
if you're a Warlock patron of the Dark Rider, which is the Headless Horseman, you get Pumpkin Bomb.
Ooh.
So a little bit of Green Goblin
Yeah.
thrown in there. But yeah, it's like, I've been in games where friends have like sent me just a picture and be like, I want to be this. I'm like, okay. They're like, you're chill with it? I'm like, yeah. If you want to try and do like Captain America or be a super, like, you want to recreate something? Cool, we can work with that. That's a good base to begin from, and then we can add the rest of the stuff later. It's, yeah, not that bad.
David and I had fun with one of your friends. David wanted to play D&D for the first time, and it's like, I want to do magic, but I want to do like gravity magic. And she wanted to be a sorcerer, and I'm like, well, good news, there's a whole wizard table of
Good news,
like
everyone.
gravity spells, because Matt Mercer and his Dunamancy. I'm like, awesome, this is easy to adapt to a sorcerer. We can do this.
Yep.
You
Just
don't-
like, thanks, Matt. Yoink.
The amount of yoinking that we do is...
Yeah. And the best part is when Kay is like, here, I have this original idea. And I'm like, hey, it's from that game movie thing. And she's like, huh?
I've apparently lifted at least 2 scenes out of my God plane that I was like, just came to me, and then they're apparently scene for scene from a game. Oops. A game I haven't played.
Right. Yeah, a game you haven't played and a movie you have not seen.
Oh, was there a movie one too? I missed that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oops. So yeah, again, let that be a lesson. You can be as original and creative. Yes, I am a thief, Sauce. You are correct. You can be as original and creative as you want to be. Someone else out there has already done it. Don't let that discourage you, because, like you were talking about with superhero, right? There's masks, super creamy. There's what's the other one? The
Mutants and Masterminds.
Mutants and Masterminds. Thank you. I'm like, something in superheroes is not the one, but it starts with the super crunchy. Like, you found a space where there's nothing in between, right? Where's the semi-smooth? And so don't be afraid to be like, oh, someone else has done this. Why are you doing it? Because I'm not going to do it like how other people did it. Or that doesn't fit. It's too crunchy or it's too creamy for me, so I'm going to do it the way that I want to do it.
And something to remember, and I don't 100% believe in this, but more than one prominent writer throughout history has said all stories have been told. And that's kind of true, and that's kind of not true. But the human experience has not fundamentally evolved all that much. But what you have to remember is not only can you tell the same story with your own spin on it, you don't necessarily have to tell it better. Like, I've had people say I can't write blank because it's not original, and I've had people say I can't write blank because it's not better than this. I would like to point out for anyone who has seen Underworld, it is Romeo and Juliet with Wolverines and or not Wolverines, with vampires and werewolves.
It would have been better with Wolverines.
Fair. Would
Where
have been better
were
with different casting, but it's Romeo and Juliet. That's it.
Yeah.
The
Clueless is a retelling of Jane Austen.
Right. You don't necessarily have to do it better. Like, think about how many iterations of Frankenstein have been rolled out. Like, the Aaron Eckhart movie is terrible, and I love it.
Oh yeah,
The Robert De Niro one is terrible, and I love it.
Lion King is just Hamlet. Sauce
Yeah,
says.
so don't feel like you have to do it better. Put your own spin on it, and it'll draw people who love those types of stories.
Put your own spin on it, and Cam, you can probably talk more to this. Put your own spin on it, and whenever possible, take it and adapt it and build your characters into that spin. Because the more you put the characters that you are creating this for at the heart of the thing, the more personal it's going to be, and the more it's going to pull your players in. And they're not going to sit there and go, oh, well, that scene was really cool, except it feels like it was very much like from this other thing I saw. They're going to go, oh my god, that was exactly what I wanted for my character.
Yeah, speaking of that, I've been doing a lot of text RP recently with some of my groups, just because being a teacher, trying to have time for live games is hard.
Being a teacher trying to have time, period.
Yeah.
My life. I guess I just decided to become a teacher during COVID. And so we've been doing a lot of text RP stuff, and it's fun because, you know, they're in some of our settings that we've done. And just like running with what folks are saying and running with concepts that folks have had, you know, come up has been really cool. And just kind of like being like, sure. They're like, does this work with the lore? I'm like, well, it does now. Why not? So for one that I'm doing, it's oh, what a cutie. We're doing it in Midgard, in Kobold's Press's Midgard, but we're doing it specifically where they're all members of the Vampire Kingdom, the Blood Kingdom. They're connected in one way or another. Some of them are Dhampir, some of them are vampires, some are others altogether. But one of the players, he was like, I want to be the sexiest, scariest vampire lady possible. And I want to be very big. And I was like, we can do that. So it's been great because he like just ramps the Lady Domuscu up to like...
I was going
to say, is there a large hat?
No, but there's a very large ornamental collar because we did it where the way that his character was turned is her husband was a ghost knight, one of the first ghost knights who were created by the Vampire King to take over the country. So her vampirism is actually tied to her being partially a ghost. So the collar keeps her corporeal and sort of locks her form. But it was great because we're playing around with it, we're RPing and stuff, and she very much has like this sense of authority because she is one of the most powerful women. And then I just had her meet the spider goddess, Rava. And
Like you do.
and we called it a meeting of the MILFs. Just because because Rava is just, I was just like, I'm just gonna ham it up. Catherine Zeta-Jones, just like cranking it up. And he texts me after, he goes, that is so awesome. It's so good, because he's like, I don't know if my character's gonna die or not, or if she's gonna like succumb to the spider goddess, but we'll figure it out. Whatever happens, happens. I'm like, he goes, is this in the lore? I'm like, no, we're just adding it. We're going with it. But yeah, that was a very iconic scene, because then he just like, because some of their channels are locked, so the other players can't see what they're doing, and then he just put in the regular channel just eyeballs, spider web, gear, and everyone was like, what's happening?
That's great.
But
so you talked about early in the pandemic, your first book, you all got together and decided to just make a book via Kickstarter. So it seems like a good time. We're at about a little over the halfway point. Chat, again, if you have questions about world building or about turning your hobby into a moneymaker. You hope it'll turn into a moneymaker anyway. Small businesses can often be a money sucker. Um,
I mean, large businesses could be a money
yeah,
sucker.
very true.
We've all
Throw it
heard
in
of
the chat.
Blockbuster.
Yeah.
But yeah, talk to us a little bit about how you got started and how you would advise or not advise someone who wants to turn their hobby into a business.
Sure. So I think the big thing is that we did supers and sorcery. We didn't really know what we were doing, so we kind of met some bumps and roadblocks and stuff like that. But it was still really fun, and we made about $12,000 for supers and sorcery,
Wow.
all of which went into paying for the book, paying artists, paying writers. When we did Comets and Cockpits, we made almost $40,000. We were funded in an hour, 40 minutes, which was like mind boggling. But with that, the challenge we ran into was we kind of went a little bit overboard. We made too much content. And I love both the books. I love the stuff we have in it, but we definitely went a little too hard. And I think we kind of were like trying to one up supers a little bit, and that was kind of like what I was trying to think of, like, oh, we got all this cool stuff. So I think that was one thing with it. But also, you know, having two separate books, the two teams were kind of not really connected, so there was some struggle there. And then also doing print on demand through one bookshelf and Lightning Source really worked for Supers and Sorcery because it was a small book. But since then, they've hiked prices stupid high, and it's made the POD stuff for Comets and Cockpits harder. So that's why we're sticking with digital for the next little while. But I'd say there's three big things that folks need to realize about taking your hobby to the next level. The first of which is you are probably going to lose friends. You are probably going to lose people that you know, because by you being willing to step up and say, this is a hobby for you guys, this is something that is a career for me. I very rarely talk to any of my old friends about the business because they think it's not stupid, but they don't really see it as taking it to the next step being something that was viable or smart or necessary. They're very still much like, it's a hobby. And then when I try to talk about it, they're like, whatever. So that's the big thing, is that you're probably gonna, you know, isolate yourself a little bit, and that's where you find a new community. Which is why, you know, TTRPG Twitter is a great spot. Obviously, you really need to navigate and be careful who you connect with, because there has been a lot of garbage in the recent months and people getting ousted, which is a good thing, contrary to people whining. The other big thing, number 2, would be do it all above board. Do it legally. Get the business paperwork for your state. Get it set up through a business office, because if you're doing it all under the table, eventually that's going to come knocking and it's going to be messy. I set up all my stuff through state of New Hampshire. I found some folks to help me out. Got into, you know, some harsh lessons with supers and sorcery because we had to, or not supers and sorcery, with Comets and Cockpits, because of how much we made. We had to pay back a lot more than we thought we did. So that's been a learning curve. But again, all above board, all done legally, all done through the proper channels. So you really need to be willing to understand that if you're going to do it a business, you got to do it the right way. And it really was us doing Comets and Cockpits that realized, okay, this isn't just a hobby anymore. I need to go through the proper channels, get it set up with the state, and that kind of thing. And it's really relatively easy. It's not that hard to do. Is it a little expensive? Yes. You know, every state's going to have different fees. I think for New Hampshire, it was like $300 or something. But you find a business office, you get the LLC paperwork, which LLC is the easiest one to do. It's a limited liability company. If it's just you or like one or two other people, that's what you want to do. If it's more than that, that's where you need to start thinking about other stuff. And then just went through the proper channels. That's what you got to do. So you need to put in the time to understand business. The third big thing is it is not a hobby. It is not a job for people who, if you are someone who does not like talking to people, if you have like really bad social anxiety, if you do not like working with people, I'm just going to be blatantly honest. Content creation is not for you. It really can't be, because now I'm not saying I'm an extrovert, so talking to people is fine. It's always been easy for me. But there are even times where I have my limits of like, okay, I just want to be left alone. But you can't content create in a vacuum of you and maybe the 4 or 5 other people that you know, because you're never going to be able to grow in that way. And if you do, it's going to be like incredibly slow. It's going to take years and years and years. And I'm not saying I'm not an expert in all this. Daylight has only been an official business for 2 years now. Well, technically 1 year. But, I had a situation where I was trying to connect with some artists and some folks who wanted to bring on for some projects. And, they're like, oh, I'm just so self-conscious. I don't know if I could do it. And I'm sitting there going, you have 37,000 followers who follow you for your art. You post all this stuff. I'm just asking you to do a character piece, and you're saying you would freak out and be self-conscious and didn't want to show it to anybody. And, I mean, that's neither here nor there, but it was just...
As a person who has climbed a relatively steep professional ladder and still has imposter syndrome, I do understand that. I deeply understand that.
So
David's rolling his eyes at me.
Well, yes.
But that's really the big thing, is that you need to be willing to realize that if you do want to go to the next level and you do want to take it from hobby, from just something you do casually, to business, you're going to have to network. You're going to have to put yourself out there. If you want to grow and you want to make money off of it, you're going to have to take really big risks. I make maybe $60 a month off Daylight. It's not a lot. It pays for gas and for like the few subscriptions I have to keep it going. I'm fine with that right now. If it could get to be more, that would be great. But I have to consistently put out content. I have to consistently engage on social media platforms. I have to be loud. I have to get out there. I have to talk to people. I have to network. It's not a full-time job, but you gotta do it. And, some folks will like follower hunt and try to just get tons of people to like follow. I don't do that because it's just, yeah.
It's not a great return on your time. Oh no!
Oh no.
Oh no!
The
Okay.
gremlins are here.
Gremlins are
when
back.
you do that shift.
Oh, there you are.
You're back.
Okay, sorry
we
about
lost
that.
you for a moment.
Okay. Just the big 3. Realize you're gonna have to find a new community because folks
Oh no!
might not see it the same way as you do. Do it all legally, above board. Am I back?
You're back.
Yep.
That was a very
Okay.
short one, at least.
Okay, we have a storm rolling in soon, so that might be why.
That might be it.
Do it all legally and above board, and realize you're gonna have to get out of your comfort zone. And I'm not saying you have to be social all the time. By no means do you have to always be social, but you got to realize that there are going to be set times where you're going to have to
hustle.
You're going to have to hustle. You're going to have to socialize. You're going to have to network.
While he's frozen again, I will say you have to pitch yourself. This is also true if you want to do in publishing.
But you got to do it.
There we go. This is also true if you want to do it in publishing. This is true if you want to do a talk show. If you want to be a performer in TTRPGs, you have to
I think
sell
I'm back
yourself. Yes, you seem to be. I was talking to fill the space. I will say, JD Lady, as you were talking about, paying everything important, JD Lady said, it's like underappreciating and underpayment of artists, the issue that's been going around. People want to enjoy a thing without understanding that to have a thing, someone has to take the time to make a thing.
Yes, we had some folks who got very nasty and
This is terrible. Oof. Okay, that storm is kicking our butts here today.
okay.
Nope. We got an okay, and it was like, yes! And then it's frozen again. David, do you have Any
I back?
thoughts? Anything to add?
Yes, you're back. And while we have you, I've had a question. So you go on Daylight Publications website,
Mhm.
and Cam lists all the artists. You have an army of artists that have done art for you.
Mhm.
Tell us about your process of working with artists, especially like in that kind of volume.
Yeah. So getting artists, I mean, most of the time I'm very open with them and say, hey, most of the time I can only give you royalties. That's all I can do through Dungeon Masters Guild and through Drive Through, because the big monies we make, that's for our big setting books. We only really do one of those a year, if that. So I'm like, hey, up front, this is what I got. I can't really confirm if you're going to make a lot. I can't really confirm how many it's going to sell. You're just going to have to take a risk. And I'm always like, I know that doesn't work for everyone, and I 100% respect that. And really, it's just finding folks who are willing to take that risk and who, I build a good rapport with. To, like, I have friends who I've worked with enough, and they don't make a ton, but they do make sales and they make a little extra. And I'm like, hey, between commissions, when you have time, there's no rush. Do it when you can. So I never am like, if we're working on something and you don't text me back after like a week, then I'm probably like, hey, is everything going okay? I just want to check. But also, like, I get sometimes very tired with how mono-stylistic RPG books are. Very, like, only painterly style. It has to look like realism. And I love that art. But I like seeing other styles. I like seeing different kinds of art. And just finding folks whose style might work well for a book, or, who, might be willing to try something new. I really like working with smaller artists, because then I kind of say, like, hey, I want to work with you. My book is your testing ground. Do whatever you want. Use this as a chance to experiment, try things out. No judgment. We're going to publish it no matter what you do, but just have fun with it. And that's something I really like doing, because then I feel like it provides a very safe space for folks to experiment and kind of get like a little taste of kind of what it feels like. I'm also just a slut for art. I love art. I most of my people I follow on Twitter are all artists. I'm like, someday, Wayne Reynolds, someday I will be able to commission you.
I know we had D'Angelo on a while ago when Emerald Templars was being kickstarted, and he did this really cool thing where I feel bad, I cannot remember the artist's name now. I remember the art piece that came out of it though. There was one of his favorite artists who does these really cool, almost Amino style, like the kind of drawings that look like they're simple to do, but are actually like Amino just breaks my brain, because I'm like, those lines are so simple and yet every one of them is perfect. I cannot art like that. And he found one of these artists and was like, hey, I really want like, I think it was like an orc warlock or an orc. It was, and artist is like, I'll do it for this amount. You don't get a revision, right? This is just, you give me a basic thing, and it was, a very reasonable price, but it was like, you get what you get. And he's like, this is for a book. So yeah, it doesn't have to be my character. It just has to represent this world. And he got the coolest piece of art for Emerald Templars. It's amazing. Thank you for hanging out, Vivian. Have a good night.
One of the things, I know I got cut off
Sorry.
it was scratchy there for a second. But one of the things we ran into with Comets and Cockpits was we had folks who were, very nasty about there being several spots where there wasn't art, where we just had not put it in the budget. Because the first book, Comets and Cockpits, is almost 300 pages. So we're not going to fill the entire thing with art, because
That's a lot of art.
that's a lot of art. And yes, there are blank spaces. There are some areas where we probably could have found some filler stuff. I'm not going to deny that. It was a learning curve. But to every single one of them, whenever they got really like, I'm open to criticism. I love critique. I love talking to folks about how to fix things. The minute you get nasty, though, the conversation is over. I'm not gonna. It's the same thing I tell my students. I'm open to hearing to you guys, but the minute you get nasty, the conversation is not continuing. And I told every one of them, I was like, if you want more art, we credit every single artist in the book. You can look them up and go commission them, and I'm sure they would welcome the work. If you really, really want that stuff, then go commission them and support them. And they're like, well, you should have spent more money on art. I'm like, we chose to pay our writers more because writers don't get paid a lot, and I'd rather my artists, make a couple $1,000s off writing this huge book, and maybe we don't have as much art. I'm sorry, you try putting together a project this big and then get back to me. But
yeah, it's like the signs you see out in front of restaurants. It's like, if you're really upset about the wait, we have applications inside.
But I love getting to play around with artists, and it's fun because right now for Portal Portfolio, it's a new little series we're doing, bringing more lineages into Supers and Sorcery. I'll throw a concept board at them, and I'll be like, "Go nuts! Just do whatever you want. Combine however you want." And then they send back suggestions. I'm like, "Sweet, this looks great." And they're like, "Really?" I'm like, "Yeah, looks good to me."
I know, too, if you're looking at putting together your first publication, whether it's, you should I didn't follow every piece of advice I've ever heard is like, please don't immediately try to do your 300-page book as your first one. David and I broke that because Godplane, is not, it's not, usually it's like, try a 5 to 8 page little thing. Just put that together. And I'm like,
we didn't do 5 to 8 pages for the first episode.
Yeah. But if you're looking at pulling your first thing together and, you start figuring out, because when you start working on these things, it's money. All of it costs a lot. And even just figuring out how to arrange everything on the page in a way that looks nice is an art form. And paying someone to do that is important if you don't have an eye for that naturally, or you don't have the tools, because that's a learning curve, and it's time versus money, right?
Yeah.
But if you go on the DM's Guild, there is art that you can use. There's pre-made art specifically put in for fillers, so you can put in art and then you can start sorting. And there's some that you can use for free, and so long as you properly credit the artist, if you use that. There's some that you can purchase it for $5 and you can slap it on your thing and you just put a credit line, and that's great. So if you do find yourself going, I have a great idea, I don't even know how to illustrate this, or I just have a bunch of blank spaces, how do I make this look good? You can do it for free or very inexpensive. But make sure you follow the terms, because these are artists who are putting their work out there for you to use for free so that you can create. If you want, be respectful if you're coming into this economy.
Yeah.
And also, like Cam was saying, like, this doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's very collaborative. You have to work with a lot of people. It takes a special kind of maniac to put together a 300, 400 page book where they do all the art and they do all the arrangement and they do all the, as someone who's worked in print for a very long time, you are not a good enough editor for you. Full stop.
Don't try to be Stardew Valley. Even Concerned Ape finally broke down and hired people. Don't try to Stardew Valley your thing.
And so it's important to, one, take their respect their professional opinion. They are experts in areas where you aren't, and it's important that you also, take the step to outsource that stuff. Like, Kay and I have worked on a number of different things, and Kay and I will start talking about art, and then I'll say, Kay, go find someone, and then Kay will go and find the person to make the perfect art for. We've been Kay's great at this, but we've also been very fortunate to have really incredible artists make stuff for us.
Rex says, as someone who's worked in publishing, 100% this. No one can do it all well. I am
Yeah.
a jack of all trades. There's a lot I can do well. I outsource, like, I am so excited for an upcoming project. Someone who may or may not be lurking in this chat has volunteered to help us with overlays. They're going to look better than what I could do. So don't be afraid to
Absolutely.
outsource. We are quickly approaching time. So Cam, any last thoughts? Chat, any last questions? It's going to be a little bit of a short episode today. There were multiple hard cutoffs going on because life and time. But Cam, thank you for coming. Closing thoughts.
Sure. I would say the last big thing, I guess this would be number 4 of my list of 3, is you need to be willing to put in the effort to find other folks to work with, and especially diverse voices. There has been a huge movement in the RPG community and in publishing in general to really work to support and push up and help those marginalized voices, whether it's folks from different ethnicities, different religious backgrounds, different gender communities, different queer populations. It's been a huge push, and it's because for so long their voices have not been part of this community. I knew many folks who were like, why is Radiant Citadel such a big deal? I'm like, because in 50 years, almost 50 years of being D&D, there's never been a book of solely artists or creators of color. There has never been a book like this. That's why it's such a big deal. And it's even a bigger deal because they do it from their experiences, because they have lived those cultures. That is their life. I'm working on a project right now. It's a micro setting called Dinopunk, which is magical dinosaurs and mammals and stuff.
Love it.
But one of the big things I wanted to do is get diverse people who have very often not been part of the greater conversation about paleontology, about ancient history. So I have a multi-ethnic, diverse team who are bringing their voices to the table, because I was like, I've got an idea. Here's the idea. You guys run with this, because I want to see what you guys bring and what you guys create. And I think it's really important. When I do Text RP, I try to find totally different people, because I grew up in New Hampshire surrounded by nothing but white people. I'm going to be totally candid about that. New England is white as fuck. And when I got the opportunity to start connecting with the RPG space, I was like, I need to meet people who are different than me. I need to work with people who are different than me, because I want to learn. I want to grow. And if you think, if you're only working with the same 4 people or the same 3 people, your writing is not going to grow. You are not going to grow. You need to be able to put yourself maybe in uncomfortable situations and learn and put yourself out there and be willing to be open to critique and willing to listen and realize that maybe you need to fix your views and you need to understand things need to change, but you need to be willing to work with different people of all walks of life. So.
And it makes a difference too. David and I together tend to tell decently diverse stories. And I created art for Godplane for most of the characters, and it looked fine. But for an upcoming project, we actually worked with an incredible artist of color. And, people of color are not a monolith, and but this person was specifically of a minority community, but not drawing characters of that minority community, but because their background is so much more diverse than a lot of it, because they've been surrounded by and drawing diverse people. The hairstyles, the features, it was all so different. Like, all of these characters are so distinctly who and what they are. And we have worked with, and no tea, no shade, like, a lot of people don't realize, especially working with artists, if you try and draw, a black woman and you draw a white woman and just color her dark,
It's not
doesn't look the same. Like, there's styles, there's hair textures, there's features, there's shapes that are different. And the more you work with people, the more diverse your art will get, the more diverse your settings will get. It all gets really cool the more perspectives you bring in, because we all see the world differently. So yes, that's a wonderful point, and we love intersectionality on this show, and we are so lucky to have so many diverse and awesome people hang out in our chat. So, chat, thank you again. David, are you going to ask our traditional final question of our guest?
Yes, the most important question, Cam. What is your favorite Pokemon?
Oh no! My favorite Pokemon is Tepig. My favorite Pokemon is Tepig.
Aww.
So many people hate Embor, and I'm like, he's literally just a big old Maori man wrestler. There's nothing more to love. But Tepig is just so cute. I have a friend of mine, an artist, at Mini Amiya on Twitter, if any of you guys want to look her up, has this adorable piggy pile sticker where it's Swinub and Tepig and Lechonk all snoozing on top of each other. And I have it on my water bottle. But yeah, Tepig, he is my favorite little fire piggy. He's just so cute.
I was about to ask your feelings on Lechonk.
Lechonk is best boy and must be protected. Anything that is pig-shaped, any Pokemon that is pig-shaped must be protected.
Spoink?
Or piggies.
How do you feel about Spoink?
Not so much Spoink. Spoink is kind of terrifying. Spoink is nightmare fuel. I hate
will
Spoink.
send you the picture later, David.
Yes, I love me a little nightmare fuel.
Cam, thank you so much for your time and sharing your expertise. Tell us again who you are and where we can find you and where we can pick up your publishings.
Yes, so I am Cam Day, head of Daylight Publications. I will soon be the one of two people, as my fiance will be joining the party once we're married in October. She's already helped create some inspiration for some of the Portal portfolios that have come out recently. You can find me pretty much everywhere at Daylight Pub 1066, mostly on Twitter, because that's where I do mostly everything. The only thing I use for Facebook is for messaging people. That's about it. Instagram, I'm even less active there. You can find all my stuff on DriveThruRPG or DM's Guild, or linked to it through my website, which is www.daylightpublications.com. We got lots of cool stuff coming. Might be a little slow because I'm starting at a new school soon, so I got 7th graders. I gotta prep for reading.
Prep for war.
Yeah.
After 8th and 9th grade, I think 7th grade, I'm gonna be like, no sweat. But there's still hope with 7th graders. There's still a little kernel of light. But yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at. And if any of you out there want to know more about publishing, want to get something published, come to me, and I would be more than willing to do layout for you, get artists for you, and help you get something out there to give you a start. I am always willing to do that for folks. I don't take very much, probably like 2%. That's all I usually take, just for getting it all together. But I will help you get something out if you want to get a start and sort of start to feel how it is. So my email is always open. My inbox is open. My DMs are always open. I am always down to help people. But realize that if you need to take it serious, I'm going to be realistic with you, and I'm probably going to come off as a dick a little bit, but that's because I take it seriously and I want you to know how it works. So
Amazing. David, who are we and what have we been doing here?
This is the Chaotic Wholesome Talk Show where we talk about TTRPGs and the TTRPG space. How to be a better GM, how to be a better player. This week, how to world build and how to turn your hobby into a business, all with a focus on inclusion and intersectionality.
And you can find us here every Tuesday, barring something bananas happening, which, occasionally happens.
Yeah.
That's David Lee. You can find him on Twitter at FullRubberDucky. You can find me on Twitter at KDamnFear. You can also find me every other Wednesday with new episodes of the Emergency Power Podcast. You can find me this coming Thursday on Waterdeep Tales. with the amazing Candace the Magnificent hanging out. Oh, look, and again, Jeff, also from the Emergency Power Podcast, just hopped into the chat just in time for me to plug Emergency Power Podcast and end this, because that's what happens every time Jeff shows up in chat, no matter if we went for an hour or 2 hours that day. Too funny. And again, coming up on the 29th, that's a Monday, whew, at the Red Area End, I will be over at the Halls of the Mad King playing a horror game, which more info will be out on soon. So, chat, thank you all. You've been amazing. Your ears were burning, Jeff. Cam, thank you again for coming on, sharing your info. We've dropped links in chat. I will put the links in the YouTube video for you VOD watchers. And thank you again, Cam. Thank you, chat. Thank you, David. You're all amazing. We will see you next week. We have 2 special guests next week. And I can't wait to tell you all about that. It will be our first time with a 4-up on this. We'll see how the layout works.
Yeah.
Thank you all again. You've been wonderful. And we will see you next week. Bye, y'all.
Toodaloo.